All right. Wow, Lisa's very bright. Hi, everybody. Uh,
Hi.
let us know you're out there. Um, Tonight we are talking about training aids and how they can help you in your training plans, teaching new things. You could get quite creative with using some of these. I did not get video, and I wanted to because I use it for something a little different. But I think we have Lisa always has lots of videos to show you.
I do.
Um,
Yeah, I think so. If we talk about like what props are for training, right? Training aids and stuff like that. Let's talk a little bit about them, and then the other thing would be like how to fade them and so forth, right? So, excuse me, like training aids and stuff are to help the dog understand what to do and how to do it, right? I think the hardest part about it is like fading them and how to get the dog to do the behavior without having that present, you know? So I know how do you use them in terms of,
so I'll give you an example of my most recent one, right? So we talk about Bam a lot. I mean, just because he's over exuberant. When I ask him to do a front or, just a come, like a formal come, not like, hey, come here, come inside, but a formal come where they come to the center of your front and sit. When he sits, he has this big, like, back up into the sit because he's a long dog, right? And so I was like, how the heck, unless I have food right there, and even then he still does this big back up into a sit. So he seems to be farther away than I want him to be. So I actually took my climb table, no legs on it or anything, so it was just on the floor, and I stood pretty much toes to the climb table, and I just asked him to do some sits there. So he's then now really close where I want him to be, and there's an object that he can't back up because he could, but right, if he backs up too far, he'd fall off the table. And again, it's only about that high, the platform in and of itself, so not like he's going to hurt himself if he messes it up. And yeah, the process to, like, how would I fade that? Well, my climb table has the mat on it, which is just very thin, so I could, in essence, take the table away, put the mat there. At least he feels the difference in the mat under his feet. And so I think that's just a generic example of sort of training aids, and I have others. I know you have a bunch too, but like, to me, it's one of those, like, he gets the behavior right, but I need to tweak it somehow. And just using cookies or just using my body isn't. He's not quite understanding what I want, or I can't get there with just the cookie. You know what I mean?
yeah. I think too, it depends on like it's a kinesthetic piece of it, right? The dog has to be able to like feel it and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. And there's some dogs, and I think it also depends on arousal. So if the dog's like super jacked up, they're not going to feel it. So it totally depends on the individual. Like we use it for like I have my vet comes, she brings her dogs and we work on stand for exam a stand because she does confirmation. We'll use 2x4s to like help them do positioning work with the front feet and the back feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll also use cavalettis or things to be able to like how they pace through or walk through stuff. And with the weather getting better now, we can actually use it a little bit more. I'll use platform for dogs that have a hard time with stay and need a visual cue to help them with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we also use different props for movement puzzles, like to help the dogs build a specific like motor pattern so they learn how to use their body and so forth. So it just depends. Like there's so many things you can use it for. I think the hardest part is like you said, it's like with the front, trying to like get them to a point where like they understand the behavior, but it's through rote pattern movement that they
Mm-hmm.
finally understand what's expected and so forth. But
Yeah,
yeah.
and then I think we really get into the booger of using this stuff, right, is it's like sometimes I feel like you have to use it for such a prolonged period of time so the dog really gets it, right? And then once you've done it for such a prolonged period of time, now you fade it and they're like, wait, I don't understand anymore.
Right.
So it's that fine balance of when you have it, when you don't. So it's funny. I know a lot of people on here probably don't do it, but since Lisa had mentioned confirmation, right? Yeah, when they're young, I have the boxes too, right? So they sit up a little bit and they slide, so you can get them in their appropriate space, front feet and back feet, and that's just for holding still, right? Right. So this is where I want you to put your body, and then one of the harder pieces of that is that's muscle memory,
Yep.
right? It helps when the dog's put together well, but that's muscle memory. So then as I'm moving, so part of what confirmation does is you have a moving piece and then you have a free stack. So they're going from moving into, all right, now I want you to plant yourself ideally in that same position that I gave you on the box. But how do you know? How close do you get to me? Where do you go in terms of my body? Ideally, they're in front of you, which is also harder because it's, getting front feet and back feet while they're facing you. So I like PVC on the floor. So you have the muscle memory, and then I put a piece of PVC there to say like, hey, by the way, I want your toes to come up to this. Don't cross it. Don't step over it. And then it helps them understand a distance from me to them. Then you have the box on top of it. So now we're combining two pieces of tools, right, into one, I would say kind of change program of what we're doing.
So when you talk about the PVC, is it like a half, is
Nope,
it like a bumper, or is it a full PVC or a jump?
it's it's just a PVC. Like think of an agility PVC bar, right? That normal, just the 1 inch or however big it is, right? And that way, if they get too close and tick it, it actually does roll. So you're like,
Yeah.
oh, buddy, a little too close. Let's try that again. I'll put it back, right? So that they know when you see that. So then it sort of becomes a cue of, oh, don't get any closer than this
Yeah.
to you.
So like Chris Zink uses that for so there's Cavalettis, right? Where they
Mhm.
have the bumpers and stuff. So you measure the length of the dog and stuff, and then between bumpers. And that's what I've used for the dogs to pace them, like to
Okay.
help them understand how to do that. And then she uses actual if you have aluminum cans and you use a PVC across them, so if the dog hits them, there's a auditory component to it.
Sure.
Whereas if you use the cones and stuff, which is fine, it's different. It doesn't feel the same or sound the same, I think, for the dog. And I've done both. And what's cool about the PVC, if you do the Cavalettis for it, to teach them how to properly walk, you can teach them how to it's almost like horses trotting in place, right? And it teaches them how to do that. But you really want the reach and drive for confirmation to reach out and hit the, stretching them out and stuff, which is really pretty. I mean, it's one of the things that catches my eye when dogs are moving, like how they stretch out the reach and drive and stuff, and what those triangles look between the front and the rear legs on both the rear end and the front end. It's real pretty to see that.
Yeah.
And then the top line, right? Because the top line is critical. And then if you're doing, I've seen it used where when we do, so with my dogs, one of the things, working on the front, putting their front feet on something. I have videos of different dogs that we've done that with, but helping that top line be straight is like helping the core muscling of the dog, right? Because if you have a straight top line, that's going to help the body work itself in terms of that. So it's really cool to see that.
Or if you're put together really well, you usually have a straight top line, but
Yeah, right. But if you're not, there's ways to affect it. Yeah.
And dogs that, and I know I know this isn't really the confirmation audience, but it does talk about kind of movement and, the confirmation world in general. If you don't have a super duper well put together, super strong dog, but it's still a nice dog and we're going to condition it and, get it to finish or special it. A lot of times they'll do road work, which is
Yeah.
a bike, right? And that also really gets the dog into the rhythm of the reach and the drive, and it builds the muscle tone while they're out there. And it's really just repetitive, like do.
Yeah, it's muscle memory, right?
Yeah,
Teaching them
yeah.
to move properly, which is
Yep.
it's really interesting to see it. When you see it naturally, it's great. But you can affect some of it. You're not going to change the physical aspect of the dog, but you can help them move more efficiently and teach them how to do that properly, right?
Yep.
And then, of course, the muscling goes along with it, and that helps the dogs in terms of how to do stuff. I think it's really interesting because, like, when I teach a sit with a puppy, for example, it's really cool when breeders actually do this, where they take the cookie and they pull the dog upward, so that when the dog is reaching for the cookie, they're bringing their back end in. That is truly muscle memory, provided you don't have the structure and stuff for it. I've seen that happen. You also see that occur with dogs, like with the longer backs, right? Shepherds, certain types of breeds have longer backs, so they want to rock back versus you pull them forward and they come up to the cookie. But you can impact some of that stuff.
Mhm.
But again, it's not going to change the orthopedic aspect of the dog. So it's really cool stuff. Yes, a PF.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Karen says horses trotting in place is a PF. It requires a very strong top line and a high degree of impulsion. So it's that proprioception, right? So if you stand on one leg, which I will tell you I suck at, my whole body starts doing this because I have bad balance. But that's really what it is. Like, stand on one leg, and you have to have the core strength, and you have to have the balance to do all that stuff. So it's hard.
Yeah. Look at like, it's crazy. I'm like, I used to be a gymnast, right? When I was much younger, like most of us did a lot of crazy things when we were younger and stuff like that. Not anymore. It's like wind can blow me over, and that's pretty interesting. But you're right. It's really cool to see, like, the way that the animals move. If you look at horses, like, a lot of that is stuff that they've taken from dogs. I forgot who it was. Do you guys remember the Suzanne talks about it, they have the radiographs of how horses move and stuff. It's no longer in print in the US, but you have to purchase it. It's like in Germany or something like that, to like see the physical characteristics of the animal moving. It's really cool stuff when you actually look at that and realize how important it is for them. But I also think breeders can affect a lot of this, right? Breeders, properly bred dogs and stuff, and breeders who are invested in how the dogs move and what they do in terms of the types of flooring they have and different things as they move through, right? I know the breeder, mixed breeder, Catherine Thomas from Rose Ridge in Canada, she does a lot of that stuff. And then she works the puppies by taking them out and stuff. I'm sure you guys have breeders that do that. But it takes a lot of work. Like, people don't understand that. It's like work and time. That's why I'm like, when people talk about breeding, I'm like, I am not a breeder. I don't want to do that. I don't have the time or patience for it. But finding the right breeder to be able to set your puppy up for success moving forward is critical. So.
I use most recently, I use a cater board to teach my Jai was having trouble staying because she really wants the cookies really bad. so staying is hard when you're starving. So I use the cater board to get her to stay. And man, it worked really, really well. And she, and now I don't need it anymore. But initially, it was, it was a really good tool for me for her to, keep her stay and be able to hold that. Especially in obedience and beginner novice, the dog has to stay and you have to walk around the ring. Well, she was really, really struggling with that, and pulled out the Cato board, got her to be comfortable on it, and I set that up. It was really fast. It went really quickly. She goes like, "Oh, you just want me to stay up here while you go?" Okay. And then now she understands, and it was clear, like Joanne said earlier, it's to provide clarity to the dog what we want
Mhm.
and develop that muscle memory. So the big trick there is to you know the big trick there is not to use them for too long, because that's where you get in trouble, right? Because then the dog's like, well, I don't, this isn't right. It's not, it doesn't have whatever that thing is. And some dogs, and it's very dog dependent, some dogs will acclimate to that so quickly that you have to fade it faster. Where other dogs, you can probably do it a little longer and they can handle it. They're okay with it. Jive, I was able to fade it within a month or so of working on it, and now she doesn't need it. But I was very conscious about when I started and when I was going to try to progress her, because that was really going to be a thing for sure. So
I think a lot of it too depends on like the temperament. So right, so
right.
like the temperament of the dog. I will tell you, like for Fender, for example, I taught him a 2 on 2 off, his back feet on something, and then 2 front feet off, and then he would go like, "Look, I can do 2 on 2 off here." And then here, and then on carpet, and then on the little bitty ridge of the 2x2s and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, at first I'm like, you're an idiot savant, but whatever. And he figured it out. Like he figured it out when it applied, right? But he took it to an extreme. But I did really try to imprint that in his brain. And so now looking back, I'm like, okay, maybe I should have like backed off a little bit on stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that's where you say like it is something that people have a hard time fading out. But then it's like knowing when the dog needs it. So we have a dog that comes to day school. I can show you video. She's a very environmental dog, so she needs visual cues are very helpful for her. But if the visual cue isn't present, she has a hard time coping or adjusting to it. And she is, so we use a visual thing. And as long as the visual is present, she's like, I can totally do this. But if the visual is not present, she has a hard time thinking through the process.
Mhm.
But I think that goes through the, what does she call it? The, like the sensitivity of the individual in terms of how flexible and adaptable they are. Like that's huge. Those are
Mhm.
things you have to remember, right? It's like, and it's like if you've ever done obedience and stuff, and you send them out to remember the gating system where you put a cookie there or
Yeah.
whatever
Right.
on,
Yeah.
and then the dogs always go there, check it, and then turn. It's like building muscle memory, but at the same time, it's real critical to like be able to read your dog to determine when I need to fade this out, when I need to test it. And I think that's where we get stuck as
Hmm.
owners and so forth with that.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
I
Go
can
ahead.
show you this video if you like. Um, Give me a minute, because God knows I'm
Yeah,
great.
because I think and I think that's where people get into trouble with props, right? They use them too long, usually is kind of the problem.
All right, do you see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, let me go ahead and play it. So
She
she
does really good on her place, though.
So this is Chloe, and Chloe is came to us as a very she's a sensitive, very environmental dog. She also has like knee issues and stuff like that. So it's been very tricky. Like we could do stuff with her, but she would injure herself because she would forgo her own safety
Yeah.
for everything else, right? No shock there. She's a terrier. However, it's like everybody's different. So here we are working on this, and this is Jody. She's like, okay, well, you stay there. And there's lots of dogs, and mind you, she doesn't really see too many dogs in her life, but we use this to help her have a brain, right? But I guarantee if we pull this away, she would have a very difficult time with it. So the fading for her is tricky, but Jody is working on her being able to maintain while she works other dogs and so forth, and she's able to hold it together. Come to understand, mom actually also does this with her in the house, but see how she comes off so bleh, and then oh my god, it's so hard. and then we have to help her. She's like, oh. But mom also does this in the house with her as well. So in her case, I mean, to me, she actually needs the visual to help
Right.
her because it's kind of like her saving herself, right?
That's so interesting that, where some dogs, yeah, they just, and I think that speaks to arousal, right? She gets a little amped up, so she needs
100%.
that focus on,
Yeah.
on, on it so that she could manage it. But like, if you don't, and that's what I mean, and depending on some things you want to try. I'm kind of a believer you want to fade as quickly as possible, as quickly as a dog is going to allow it, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like I said, my lab took a month of working it, and again, all she really needed was clarity. She was very unclear about what I wanted when I put her in a stay and walked around, and it was. And I know, and everybody's like, "Oh, she just loves you." It's like, no, she was, she wants the cookies, and I had cookies. I'm carrying around cookies, so it was a little bit more of a, so yeah, you want to fade it, as quickly as you can, because some dogs and people get really dependent on that, on the props and stuff, and especially depending on what you want to do it, what do you want to use it for, what the goal is for the training, you want to be really mindful of that. And like for Chloe, I'll be honest, probably keeping a place isn't going to be the worst thing in the world for her, and
Right.
it's not.
What helps her save herself, right?
Right,
Like,
right. It's not going to affect her life in any way, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so because and that's what I mean. It's like for pet dogs, it's for a quality of life, but for performance, it's it's to play the game, right? So and then that's where you might need a little help providing clarity for the dog, right? And like I said, for some dogs, having a mat or a place is perfect. That's all they need, and it's all good, right? But like in obedience is try to make it clear without, back in the day it was a lot of compulsion for that. So now we just put her, just having them elevated a little bit off the ground, just keeps them there. It helps them just think about it a little harder, and it just made it clear. And once she was clear on it, then
Yeah.
it was easy. It was easy for her to work through that. So it worked a lot quicker than I anticipated. And going back to Joanne's, the Cato board is really helpful because I also have a very long beast of a dog that he's so big, he tends to want to rock back. So the Cato board helped with that quite a lot, because then he can't rock back because he takes up most of the Cato board, so he's not able to rock back into that set, right? And to be fair, am I gonna get worked up about not having a perfect, sit?
well,
No.
it's relative, right?
Yeah, he's a
Do you
big
want-
boy.
You
It's
want
like
a perfect
we'll
score.
try
I mean,
to- we'll try to work it, but if it doesn't
Right.
happen, I'm not gonna, I'm not
right.
gonna.
In the end, he's still sitting.
Yeah, exactly right. Is it perfect? No, but so I try to help him, because sometimes I think you or Joanne alluded to it. It was a physical thing. Some dogs, it's a physical thing. They can't physically really, because of the way they're built or whatever, they can't do it the way you want them to do it. So sometimes you have to just be like, okay, this is what we got, and this is what we're gonna go with, on that. And so that's why with Tango, it's better. It's probably never going to be perfect, but that's okay. We keep working on it, and that's where we'll still pull out the Cato board from time to time. Where Jive now, I don't need to. So it's
Yeah.
very.
It's interesting. So, Joanne, do you have any video on
No, I didn't get any. I'm sorry. I didn't.
That's okay.
No.
I think it's interesting. I thought I had some videos looking for, but I do have video of if everybody remembers the little Papillon, right? Remember
Brody.
he was having a problem, and part of what mom wants to do is work on like the CGC skills of approaching and stuff, and he's got handling issues, so we're doing stuff with him. But here's a video. If you guys don't mind, I'll go ahead and share it. We used a Cato board to help him. Do you see that?
No.
No, not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. And there you go. Sorry. That's because I haven't posted it yet. Let me open this up. So here we go. So here's Bodhi, and so we're trying to like change his mindset or help him understand how to be okay with being handled. Why is this? Oh, there it is. So we put him down. He's like, and he shakes off, right? That's
It's
like
like-
information right there. And
Right.
so I said, hey, do you remember this? And he's like, I want to play the game. So I had to cue him. He's pretty jacked up. I'm like, oh God, can you sit? He's like, oh, I can't. And mind you, he's a teenager with big feelings. Good. There you go. It took him a bit. And he likes toys. And so I had to mark it and play with the toys and stuff like that. But teaching him how to stay with approach or touching, that type of thing, is really helpful with a Cato board as well
Yeah.
for him. You know, eventually we'll fade it out, but you have to start somewhere and
Yeah.
help with understanding, right? And I think that's the critical part of it. And there's different ways to teach like a front. His issue isn't, she wants to do obedience. She wants to get CGC skills. There's some impulse control. I'm going to touch you. He's like, oh, I can't. And you see how he lifted his, he's so naughty. See how he lifted his little paw? He's like, I can't. You're going to touch me. It's terrible. Not really terrible, but it's so exciting. Good. So I had to back it down. And I think this is stuff that, you know, again, it all comes down to reading the dog to determine how to proceed forward, right?
He's so cute.
I know. He's something else, that one. He'll sit in my lap now and he's like, he wants to play hand games. So I've worked really hard with him to like help him be comfortable. He's gotten so much better with us picking him up because before he used to squeak and stuff like that. But, you know, it's time and patience that gets us to where we want to go. But you can see he loses little mind. But again, he's, you know, a year and a half-ish years old. So he does have a difficult time with impulse control stuff. So yeah, so we're working on this stuff.
Right.
But the Cato board actually helped to try, tries to help him have an understanding of it. So it can help, and it depends on your end goal. Like, you know, you're doing it for obedience purposes, which is great. But you remember the one time we went to a seminar, and I was having issues with my one dog. It was Lacey. Lacey had problems doing a sit stay where I walked away. And I thought maybe there was a miscommunication on my end, or why are we not understanding this? If I walked away, she anticipated it as a recall, or she would go into a down.
Mm-hmm.
Here's something that happened. So the instruction was maybe put a leash behind her to help her understand that you're there, you know, set up some sort of routine she understands. What turned out, she had back issues. So she couldn't hold a sit position, right? So when you see that stuff, I think you got to consider why. Is it occurring? What's happening? Because it doesn't necessarily mean misunderstanding. It could be a physical issue too, like it was with her.
Yeah. Right. And I will give you one that's not sports related. Well, it is, but it's not. It's not a sport related. So Roscoe came to me. He had some pretty traumatic things happen in the crate. Okay. And so he hates crates. The first night I brought him home, I tried to put him in a crate and he was like fish on a line. I mean, flopping. It was sheer panic. And I was like, okay. Like, please don't eat the bed, but I'll leave you out behind a gate. So we worked really hard on what can I do to make this better for you? Right. So he was okay in an X pen with an open top. Okay. So then I transitioned that to, what if I put an X pen and I kind of squeeze the X pen in a little bit to an open crate door? And for this particular dog, he's like, I don't care. I will lay in this much space. I'm not going in that crate. So I noticed at home, he would lay in an open crate, but they have they're like deep den dog beds. So they're about 10 inches tall on the sides. Okay.
Mhm.
So as far as a training aid, he liked it when he could kind of hunker down and feel secure in an open wire crate. And I tried all different kinds of crates. So it wasn't necessarily just the crate size. So I transitioned it to a big bolster bed with high sides in a crate in the car. And he was like, I don't like it, but I will do it. And now he's okay with that. So it seemed like as long as the sides were tall, right, and kind of blocked out the bottom quarter of the kennel, that works for him, right? I have tried to fade some of that and it bothers him a lot.
Yeah.
So, something in terms of what makes it better, what helps progress something. I think, similar to the little pitty, right? Maybe you never fade the blanket. I don't know that I mean, I've had him almost 2 years now, 2 years now. And, I will be honest with you. I have not worked the crate by itself a lot. He can do it where I need him to. But that seems to really, really be an assist to him is that piece to block it out. So weird, but asking those questions to say, well, what if it looks like this? What if it looks like that? What about this flooring, that flooring? What if I put a blanket over it? He's like, no, gotta be inside the crate, gotta be here. And he was really clear about it.
I think too, don't you think that has to do with one, adaptability of the individual, right?
Yeah, for sure.
How flexible are you?
Mhm.
And I think the less flexible you are, the more you need visual prompts to help you. Not good or bad, it's just information about the individual, right?
Yep.
But I also think like predictability, because I think the less adaptable you are, the more predictability you need. I don't know if that makes sense, because if I have predictability, it provides a sense of safety and security. I know how to act
Sure.
in that environment. But and I find that the dogs that need props are able to fade out quicker because either we're really clear about what our criteria is, or they're pretty adaptable dogs.
Yeah, and just some clarity on that. So Suzanne puts it, I think, the best way I have heard it, right? She said, "Are you an orchid or a dandelion?" And
Yeah, right.
orchids, I mean, they're at least much more hardy now than they were when they first became popular. But I mean, back then, I remember a guy who grew them, and he was like, the room had to be at this temperature, and he had this drop cloth that had to go over him 6 hours a day, and this light, and turn this one on at night, and like,
Right.
or they would die if they didn't get exactly the care they needed. Versus a dandelion, who you're like, I don't know about you guys, but I think I've seen some of them already coming up. And,
Right.
it's like they'll grow anywhere, anytime, do whatever to them, they'll come back.
Yeah.
So that adaptability, I think I love using that as an example from her, because it's so it really does. You see those dogs, right? Where like I went to that building once and somebody dropped the dog bowl. I'm never going in there again.
Right.
Versus the dog that's like, well, that sucked.
That's your orchid, or that's your
And so here's the thing: in some cases, let's say the prop isn't for the dog; it's for the people.
Yeah.
Right?
They're not as adaptable.
So, and this is a real simple example. It's in one of our classes. And this is a very simple demo, right? This is an obedience class. And basically the cones are props, right? They're all props, and they're not for the dog. It's for the person, for the people, right? It's real simple. And so eventually, because the thing is, we also have to keep in mind that the props are also for us in many cases. This is a very simplistic demo, but it's true, because we have to be able to develop that muscle memory to walk. The dogs know what to do, right? So it's just this is a real basic, simple, because these are props too. And you'll see in the background we have the hula hoops. She uses it to teach us how to go around the tango.
I think what you're what you're talking about has to do with like clarity, right? So if we are not clear in what our expectations are, or we're sloppy about stuff, props can help us streamline the understanding of the individual. So in some cases, like in class, I used delayed reinforcement where we had a chair. We had the cookies on the chair and we worked on walking up to the chair without pulling, right? And then you had that, yes, and then ran up to the chair to get the cookies and so forth. And I think it helped drive home the lesson. I guess the concern I always have is like, do you know how to transition this to outside of class? You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you're like, as a trainer, we want them to like be successful and be able to get the information across to the individual dog based upon their lifestyle, right? And then you come up with different ideas, put treats different places and ask them to do something here and then run to the cookie and be like, yay, that's amazing. But you're right. I think props do lend clarity not just to the individual working the dog, but also to the dog as well. So it's kind of a flexible idea,
Right.
so forth.
Because that's what I mean. A lot of people are like, oh, it's for the dog. Not all the time. Right. Sometimes it's for the people. And so that they can kind of get the feel for it. So, you always want to make sure as a trainer, are you doing it for you? Do you need the prompt? Or does the dog? And if it's you that needs a prop, it's okay. But you got to remember that for the dog, you might need to make some adjustments going forward because the dog didn't need the prop, but you did. And now, you know what I mean? So you have to be mindful whatever prop you use for yourself or for the dog, you then definitely make sure that you're aware of who's benefiting from that particular that prop, right?
Yeah, one that comes to mind, I'm sure all of you that teach beginning obedience or you've sat in on one, right? I like to tell people where to put their hands because
Yes.
when you walk in and I see you're walking your dog with your arm this way, you're like, this dog pulls so bad. And you're like, what is this? Your arm's way back here before it's a leash, right? So I always kind of tell them, tuck a thumb in your pocket, right? Tuck a thumb in your pocket so that you aren't the one pulling on that, or vice versa. People who allow the dog, right, all that space to go and wander off.
Leash eater, right?
Yeah, leash feeder, leash eater. Yes, exactly. And so sometimes you might tie a knot or wrap a piece of tape around a leash just to give people not even the visual, but sometimes it's just that tactile feel of like, am I where I'm supposed to be on that lead? And those are nice because you can pull the tape off or untie the knot, you know what I mean, to give yourself that help. And again, that goes back to muscle memory, right? Once you know where you're supposed to be, you don't need it anymore. So
yeah.
And I think that's relative to like the individual, right? Everybody's a different kind of learner.
yes.
So understanding, right? Understanding what works for you. There's some people who need the actual physical, they see it and then hold it and practice, rehearse it. I remember when we went to Michael Shikashio, right?
Yeah.
And he had all these like handling and like, how do you do that? What is that? And so it's muscle memory, right? I'm like, I walked away with 2 good pieces of understanding of how to handle the leash in terms of like how you hold it and like how we are really we can really be a handicap to the individual dog depending like for walking and stuff depending on the type of walking we're doing. Like we give too much, we let our hand out, so we have no leverage. If the body's close or the hand's close up holding the leash, you're like, this is all you get. The dogs have no kinds of issues. And I think that's pretty interesting, right? But it was cool to see the different types of handling that he does in terms of, and he's one of many that do leash handling. Suzanne, I know, does stuff, pulsing of the leash to be able to get the dogs to like turn and look at her type of thing, little communication via leash. And then Trish McMillan handling through sheltering and stuff like that. So there's a variety of ways to do that. But you're right, Joanne. I see a lot of that where they're like, they have their hand on the pocket and they're like, sit. And the dog's like, got it. It's still a visual prompt. We're working. I can do that. And then you're like, stop, put your hands at the side. And the people are like, they would prompt with their head. Sit down. Yes.
Wow.
And I'm like, you realize you're still healthy.
Yeah, right.
And it's stuff we all do. I've done it too. Or
Oh yeah, totally.
And I'm like, oh. So
Right.
like we're equally responsible for that.
I remember back in the day when I was running agility, I was this weird forward leaner, like runner, and I had the like here, right? And so finally one of my instructors came and put a clipboard in the front of my pants. Like
Mm.
so I couldn't when I tried to
Lean
run, I couldn't lean forward. And like that was pretty telling. It was pretty quick to be like, "Oh, okay, I got it."
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
do that. Yeah,
Um
that's funny. So it's one of those things. So and going back to what kind of a learner we are, because it's very interesting. And Suzanne does a whole I think workshop seminar on it. Like if you are a visual person and your dog is more auditory, or if you have a dog that's more visual learner and the human is more auditory or more talks a lot and the dog isn't very you know what I mean? It's how those different situations work together, right? um anyway, Mary has a question. What is your opinion of remote trainer and what applications do you use it for? So I use I'm going to jump in here now. I use the treat and train. I've been trying to use it for Tango for the barking in the office. So I have it. The hard thing is having it all the time. But we put the remote trainer there. It's there by him. My lab is suffering on the other side of the gate because she can't get to the cookies. And when because usually I'm not there because I'm teaching. So my staff will, if he's quiet, will hit the little remote. And
So he's in a crate, right? Is what you're
no,
saying?
he's not in a crate. He's in the office.
And so the lab is suffering in a crate.
No. I have a gate between the spaces.
Oh, okay.
So she's on the other side going, I know this one. I can do it. Because so and then Tango gets reinforced for being quiet. And it works some. But barking is very reinforcing for him. So those are some of the uses. Also, Mary, that treat and trains are using it a lot now for agility for teaching distance.
Mhm.
So I've used it with my puppy for that. So to do a line of jumps, I put the treat and train at the end, and that way you can control when the food dispenses. If he misses a jump or if he misses something, there's no food. If he gets it, then voila, there's food. But again, especially for agility, you really got to fade that quickly because it does become that can become if you have a dog that tends to rely on it, then it can become a bigger problem. But basically,
Well,
like teaching the muscle memory to go out away from me, ahead of me. So
I think it's also good. Like you can do a treat and train for a place or a spot, right? So if you want
yep,
to teach them, so like let's say you're teaching them to send away to something, you can use it for running contacts. I've seen that used for that.
yep,
Also,
absolutely.
you have to teach it. It's a forward focus type of thing in agility, but you can also teach it if you have a toy motivated dog as well or a
Yep.
target trained dog, you can do that as well that way. But you still have to train the impulse control aspect of it to teach them it's not available until you do the right thing, like you're saying.
Mhm.
yeah,
Um,
I used it
I
for
think,
weaves. So
yeah. And I
gotta do
use
them all.
for weaves, like I would use a forward focus, and timing is critical when you're using a
Yep.
toy, right?
Yes,
So
which
if
I
I'm like, you go forward, yes, toss the toy and stuff, depending on who the dog is. I've also seen it used for stays at a distance and stuff like that, where they stay, you say, yes, get it, and it's behind them to not close space. So placement of that particular reinforcement or that particular equipment is critical too.
yeah.
So, you can do anything, honestly, with
Yeah.
props. It depends how hard you want to work.
I
What is your
I
goal?
have used it in nose work as well. And like again, don't do this a lot, but just to play a game, right, upon like distance and its odor, not necessarily your handler, right? And so if they were way across the room and there's a hide on the treat and train and they come in, boom, and then the cookies fall, and then they're like, wait, how did what? Like, so it's almost like pairing, but for a more advanced dog, right? Who's
Yeah.
used to now the handler being such a part of the search. It's just a different reward based. I don't do it often at all. But
But it
was
would
just
be
kind of fun with me.
that would be kind of a cool thing to use because I bought a smaller remote food dispenser thingy, uh, and Joanne, they give me an idea. I don't know how it would work. I mean, you'd have to still again you'd have to fade it, but if let's say you're doing where you put it a little bit unelevated and maybe there's something above it where you can put this thing and dispense a treat, that might be where it's not as noticeable, like if it's on a shelf or something like
Yeah.
that. You know.
There's
Or
there's
even if
different types. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, or even if the dog like transition spaces goes into the other room and you're not there, right? And you can see them, you can reward them when you're not even there, so that they stay,
At
you know,
source,
and
yeah.
wait for you. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
And
Well,
using
there
it
was-
using it occasionally, that's a great idea. I like that.
Yeah.
The treat and train's
Yeah.
too big, but that small thing, it's a small square thing.
Clean
Yeah.
Run has a little one. It's
yeah,
like a
that's it.
garage door.
That's where I got it. Yep.
Yep. The treat and train takes too long. Like when you hit
It
it,
does.
it's like meh, spit.
Yeah.
Like, no, it takes
You're like-
too long, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The other
Right.
one's just like you hit it, it's like
Yeah.
pops
There's
through.
other ones. So I used to use popper boxes. So there was what's her name? She's down in Indy. God, I can't remember her name. So I had her come up to my place when I was in Maryville, and so she had popper boxes, which is what the police officers use. So it was a section for the odor, and then there was a ball in the one
Oh, like
popper
red.
box, right?
Yeah.
And we had a remote and it would just pop. So this is relative to dogs who are interested in toy play and stuff like that, to build hanging out at source and stuff like that. It was really cool. But one, you have to be really good on your timing. So that's on your instructor, right? To help you build the value and the timing of it. Because let's be honest, like we're not all really good about timing and reinforcement. And then also it's like, it was really cool because then it looked the same across the board. There was 3 dummy boxes and a box that was loaded with odor plus the popper, the ball. So I remember doing it with a Dutch Shepherd who was like, she was like, come on. She'd get so jazzed up by the odor, the ball there. Yeah. And she'd be like, come on. She'd like wait. And then I pop. She's like, oh my God, this is amazing. It was really cool to see
Yeah.
those dogs build into it. And I remember one time I had Ivy who was into toys too. And
Right.
so the same idea is that she had the popper box and there was odor at source. And I was like, I want to play with it because it was some Hobart police officers that came by. They had a Dutchie and a Malinois, a German Shepherd and a Malinois sitting at the sides. And Ivy was like, she went there and she stood and she's holding and waiting. And I'm like, yes. And I threw the toy instead of popping it off the box. The one dog who was like, yeah, she heard yes. And he's like jumping. This is great. Where's my toy? On the cop side. It was funny. I was dying. But it's really interesting. I think a lot of it has to do with, right? You can use props, but then you have to transition to, right? Transition over.
Mhm. And that's what I mean with agility, especially the treat and train. It's really, really helpful for the dog walks and that distance stuff. Because I will need that because I will never
Be there.
with my dog. So I rely on that. But yeah, you could see, and already my young dog is already looking for it, and I'm like, so I'm kind of going between the toy and the treat and train. So he's not always looking for it. But yeah, he's pretty. Oh, what is that? So you guys, that's the thing. It's like depending on what your goals are, and also it's really important that props or tools are just tools for your dog, right? They're not meant to be for the life. And so, Mary, I don't know if you and the other remote trainer that we also speak of as e-collars, which
I think you have to be careful
Yep.
of the dog's emotions when you're dealing with e-collars, right?
Yep.
Because you can correct so it was interesting. Let me just jump in on this. Sorry, Nance. Today I did a private and I went to the person's home. They had a Bernedoodle. He was 2.5 years old. And He knew all the behaviors. He knew place, he knew sit, he knew down, he knew stay. You know what he didn't know? Impulse control and choice. He had no idea. So even though you can teach specific types of behaviors and obedience,
Yes.
like somebody had posted, I think it was Amy Wukatich posted, you cannot obedience your way out of a behavioral issue, right?
No.
In his case, he didn't know how to deal with when he was excited. So, like, people would come to the door. He's like, yeah, oh my God, there's people. And he would get overexcited and then he would make not great choices. So she had a remote collar on him and she trained him, and not right or wrong, but she trained him at 9. It was a particular place that used remote, and they didn't expose him to other dogs. They trained behaviors, but they didn't do any proofing or helping the dog troubleshoot stuff, right? And I think that's where you get into trouble with some of these types of techniques. You have to be very aware of how what's the dog emotional state based upon their body language to determine how to proceed forward, right?
Mm.
And so we did a video, and I take videos when I do this stuff. So I was like, okay, here's a simple thing. He's super excited about a ball. There's no negative emotion connected to it. Can he sit, stay, and you put the ball down? And can he offer attention to you and you say, get it? And he does, right? He's like, yeah, this was great and it was amazing. But when she brought him out and he had his collar and a leash on, he saw me, he looked away, he licked his lips. This is a lot of pressure. I can't. What's happening? So it was very interesting. But by the end, he's like, this lady makes some really fun stuff happen. So I'm affecting the emotional state of the dog. And I think that's the piece that's missing when you're working on just behavior or doing
Right.
the things versus affecting, the affect of the dog.
Right. And then we just got a dog in, I did on Thursday. They used an e-collar to help him deal with his reactivity. And unfortunately, he's, going back to orchid or dandelion, he was more of an orchid. So the being corrected around the other dogs was so stressful for him. He wouldn't eat. It actually made his situation much worse with that particular training. So unfortunately now, he needs medication and to be able to handle with the level of stress being around the other dogs. But so it depends. And like I said, the applications for like the remote trainers, the treat and trains and things like that are vast. But as Joanne said, they have some limitations. They can be slow. They can be so big. So for the dogs that tend to be more visual, it's harder to fade. Those things, but they do have their place, and they are they can be used as a tool for sure for some of the some of the things. But again, it's always knowing when to transition away from them or reduce it or use it. So you're always checking and balances, right? Like with Jive, we did it for a couple of weeks, few weeks on the Cato board, and then we did one, and I had her stay. I just walked a few feet away and came back, and she was able to hold it. And then I walked a little further away and made a turn, and she was able to hold it. And then we went back to the Cato board when I wanted to go all the way around. And then I took it away so it was a matter of kind of checking where she was at and where her understanding was. And so it didn't take her long to understand that, oh no, you sit there as I walk around. I'm not leaving. I'm just gonna go right here. And she was like, oh, okay, that's all that's happening. Then I can totally do that. But then, again, the prop wasn't meant to stay there for always. It was just for the little while, just to provide clarity for her to understand what we were wanting to do. So
I do have a video I wanted to show about stillness, right? So
oh
for those people that are working on, all right, for those people that are working on, so like one of the things that I don't think we spend enough time with is fitness. And because it's boring, because the foundation of it is super critical to like stillness is important and so forth. And again, this is building strong bodies. I believe in building strong bodies and strong minds. So here's a dog who, oh gosh, I hate that. Here's a dog who we've been working with to try and help them understand how to be still. And tell me if you could see this. How about now? Can you see the full screen?
Yeah.
So we blocked it off because the other dogs would get excited. And this is a young Jack Russell who is a little sensitive around other dogs and so forth. So coming out of you could see he has a hard time. Let me close the volume. He has a hard time, so we're working on stillness coming out of a crate, but using a visual for front feet targeting is what the goal was for this particular exercise. On top of any time you work with a dog, right? You see Jody a lot in these videos because she can work and I kind of dictate what's happening or kind of say what's going on and why we're doing what we're doing. We've worked together for a long time, and her criteria is crazy impeccable as far as she's very consistent and she's very particular about what she's reinforcing. So she puts me to shame. I'm not this particular. So he comes out, he comes off leash, but even that was a shake off was hard. So she works on attention. He's an intact teenager. So we're working on front feet targeting and being still for the top line situation. So you could see how he has a hard time with this. And so the platform itself, or the two bars, are bigger. So she releases him, and then you say if you can go there and maintain it, then you get more cookies and so forth. So he's trying to help himself. She's like, go get that cookie. Reapproach. She's like, let's try one because the two was too big. And he can see it, but he's so aroused, he's having a hard time with it. He's like, forget it. I can just give it to me, hand cookie. I want the good stuff. Whatever she had wasn't enough. That works right there. Good. So working on a straight top line, if you see that. And then his feet, do you see the hock? The flat part of his back foot is not up and down. So we want that a little more. And now he's popping out in the front a little bit with his feet. So we're working on just stillness here. And stillness is hard for dogs who don't want to keep moving, right? I think at times people think that, oh, hey, my dog just needs to expend energy. I'm like, thoughtless energy is fine, and that'll tire him out. But it's going to rehearse just over arousal and bad form, right? Good.
So this is so nice. It's yes, you're working on his brain, but it's so nice because it really is like yoga and stretching, right? Help the dog. He's so straight in that rear that right. It's so unnatural for him to stand correctly. So making him do this stretches out all those muscles and actually puts him more into a correct frame.
I need somebody to help me do that too for myself.
Right?
I'm a Velcro, so come on over. I'm sure Jody would be happy to torture your puppies. But it's true.
I meant me.
Oh, yes, I know. I need somebody to stand there and reinforce me for standing straight. I know.
Yeah, me too.
Stretching my muscles.
Stretching my muscles, yeah.
But it's important, and like this in and of itself is hard work. These guys, when we do this stuff, we do other stuff, but we do some physical exercise with them as well, like this, just standing still. And it's enough to like cap them out for the day. Yeah. They're like laying there sleeping, like, cashed out because it's hard.
Yep.
To think about how to use your body properly.
I know.
And you can even see if you know bodies, right? For him to be able to stretch that rear, he rocks way back on his wrists almost. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Oh.
So so the first part is getting the front end. So in canine conditioning, the group, it's Annalee Sanders, who we follow. And so she has a regimen for different parts of what the dogs do. So you can tell when he starts to get tired because he starts losing his form, right? He stops thinking, he gets lazy. And then he cuts out and stuff like that. He's like, I don't want to go back in the crate. So So these are some of the things that is important information. Then he goes to try to pick a fight with the other dog or yell at the other dog, right? But it's really cool stuff to see them when they figure it out. And I played with this with my own dogs. I'm like, just stop moving. Like
Yeah.
it's a skill. Like it's a
Right.
skill we don't rehearse much, because we're like, hurry up, tire the dogs out. And I'm like, no, but if you think about it like form and function, if my dog is constantly moving and moving and moving, and I've learned this from having over aroused dogs, they injure themselves. And then their longevity of their jobs don't last as long as I would like for them to, or they become painful in the end.
Yeah. 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 And that's the other thing. It's one of those stillness around other dogs is really important. And so I'm
Right.
kind of working on that with Mambo, and he's gotten much better. But the key is go get out of the crate and sit,
Yep.
and we start from that position. Otherwise, he's just like a fish on a line, and I hate
Mm.
that. And now
Yeah.
now he's a much bigger. He's almost 70 pounds now, so it's like I can't have that. He's too hard, too heavy to do that. So but any props you use, you want to know that about 80% of the time you're getting the behavior. That's when you start to like know that you need to start fading that prop, whatever that is. And same for you. For your props, whatever props you use. So like I need that big hula hoop around that cone because I can't do a big circle if my life depended on it. So I just need to work on that more because I just, it's just hard for me. Where my dog, I could fade it faster for her. For me, a little bit longer there, a little more work on my end. But and I think again, when you're choosing a prop for whatever training, you want it to provide clarity for the dog. That's it, clarity for the dog. The rest of it, if you're doing it for you, and you really, that's why you want to be thoughtful about why you're using it. Like, are you doing it for the to be clear for the dog? And if you're not, then you really have to ask why we're using it. What's the purpose of it? Because sometimes people like to get, and I see this a lot in pet dog training. I don't know if you guys, lots of equipment, lots of stuff, lots of gadgets, lots and lots of it, and and there's just so much of it. It's like, so what is it supposed to do? What are the goals for these particular gadgets that we're using? So you want to really be thoughtful. And you as consumers with your trainers, you should ask, what is it supposed to do? And how does it help? Because if you're not asking those questions, then you're just using it and you become more dependent on those things. So they should be to provide clarity for your dog and provide and have, allow him to just make the right choices and what, guide him in the way that you want. Right.
I think one really good example of that is using a platform or a place over the really relaxation protocol,
Yeah.
right? So using a prop, what's the purpose? So platforms are usually, in my experience, have been kind of putting them on the ready. So you hang out there until you're released to do something. The mat training type of stuff is kind of a relaxation, a visual cue for the dog. But the really relaxation protocol should be, hey, chill, and you just do it regardless of whether there's a prop or not. Is that kind of your guys' understanding of it? Like how to use the different types of things, like a platform versus a mat.
Like for like in my, like the cater board, I want you to be here until I tell you on the ready, right? But I do see I've seen dogs that use the platform and they just chill out there.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you train it. Or so, like you said before, like if you're clear in your head about why you're using this prop, because I've used a platform for relaxation as well. So like Ivy, for example, I could set her up anywhere and I'm like, just hang out there. And she's like, okay. And she just lays there, right? Until it's her turn or whatever. She's like, oh, is it my turn yet? But I want her, because she has a higher issue of highly over arousal and making bad choices. relaxing on something, and she needs that visual cue. So not only is it, like you say, clarity for the handler, but it's also
Right.
clarity to the dog
Right.
why you're using the prop you're using.
Right.
So
Right. And so that's what I mean. So just be mindful about why you're using things, and be creative too, right? You guys, be creative. There's some things that you didn't even think of using, for that,
Yeah.
for training. Think about what would make this clear for the dog.
And sometimes nothing, right?
Mhm.
I'm on
Yes.
5 years of relaxation protocol, and we get it, but it looks like this.
that's genetic. Genetic is
Yeah. But really, so it's like, not knowing everything I know about what causes that. It's sort of like you're always looking for that, but what else? What else can I use? And sometimes the answer is like, go
Nothing.
get some professional help, because
Yes.
nothing, right?
No.
That's what you have, and I'm sorry.
Sometimes the answer is nothing.
Go
Yes,
buy wine. That's
absolutely.
what you should do. Go buy wine.
Yes.
So,
and don't get don't under too much. Use what use what you need to get the task done, and be very clear. Again, it goes back to being very clear about what you're using it for, right? All right, you guys, awesome. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. And
time.
come here. Come here. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
not for you.
Bye.
Good night.